Okay, good afternoon everyone. For those of you that don't know me, I'm Nazrana from Career Services, and I've got a few additional Career Services staff members here. So after the session, if you do have questions for us, we can tackle that later, but I think we are good to go. I'd like to call upon Prof, who's the incumbent HOD for the Department of Physics and Astronomy. Congratulations, Prof. To officially welcome Dr. Wenztel, and then we're going to get started. Okay, please bear in mind that this event is being live streamed. So if you do have a question and you don't want it to be, in the live stream, just write it on a piece of paper and or go onto YouTube and just type the question to us. Okay, one moment.
Thank you. My name is Solven Halindintwali from the Department of Physics and Astronomy. So it is a privilege and honor to introduce Dr. John Wenztel, CEO of Adcorp. Actually, Trevor, and he's a part of the physics department, and Sumila, she's the champion of the physics society to be launched soon, at UWC. So they have been instrumental in inviting Dr. Wentzel. If I read from the email that I received, he's of course the CEO of Adcorp, a multinational employment sourcing and a training company that employs more than 40,000 people. And it does have I read 2,900 clients across South Africa, Australia, Philippines, Mauritius, etc. So many, many countries. If I read on his summary, short paragraph on his summary, he started his private sector career as an industrial engineer with Unilever. After completing an MSc in physics, solid state physics, I'm a solid state physicist as well. So he's actually the right person to tell you, everyone, though, yeah, we don't have an engineering faculty at UWC, but many people, they aspire also to go into industry. So he's the right person actually to tell you how to transition from blue sky physics, blue sky chemistry, blue sky science to industry. Dr. Wentzel, the floor is yours. So the title of his talk is Success. Success is a journey. The floor is yours.
Thank you. Thank you, Prof. Let me start off firstly by thanking you all for taking time out of your diary and your day to attend this lecture today, or this talk today. I hope you find at the end of it a little bit of insight. Some things maybe you didn't know before, some information maybe that you didn't have before. And as Prof has said, what I want to cover today is a topic which I think, for those of you who are in final year, it's something that you will be facing in the next couple of months. It's making that transition from being at the University of the Western Cape and then entering the formal world of work. For those of you who are not in final year, it's something that's going to be coming along. Studying, only a handful of you are likely to persist and take up a role in academia or find a niche role in the world of work. So what are we going to cover in today's talk? Prof has introduced me. I'll talk a little bit about myself, and then I'll talk a little bit about the company Adcorp. You may not have heard that. And then I think we'll cover a couple of things. One of the big things that's happened is the nature of work. The workforce and work itself has changed. We'll talk a little bit about some of those changes. And then as you look into potentially entering the world of work in South Africa, what does the South African job market look like right now? What are the macroeconomic factors that are affecting the job market, which you are going to have to face as you enter that world of work? Importantly, what are employers looking for? when you enter the world of work, and what kind of jobs are there at this point in time, and what sectors are hiring, and where are those jobs located. And then finally, we'll talk a little bit about the transition that I made from being, as Prof has said, an academic in essence. So a little bit about me, and I talk a little bit about this because I think it's important for you as graduates, as you get to the end of your academic studies, to look at the world of work and say, you know what, I can achieve, and I can achieve big things. So as Prof has said, I've got a couple of degrees. I was born in Manenberg in Cape Town. Anyone know Manenberg? So you will know it's one of the wealthiest suburbs in South Africa, yes? Okay. No, it's not. I was born in Manenberg, Cape Town. If you're still staying in Manenberg and you are at this university, remember that I am proud of you to be here. Never, ever stop believing in yourself and your ability to succeed, even if you come from a place like Manenberg. Born to a single parent. My dad had the courtesy to abandon my mom when she was pregnant with me. And why do I talk about this so freely? Because at the end of the day, do not, as you finish your career, as you go into the second and third year of university, do not let the circumstances of your birth define the person that you can be. So take that away, if you take nothing else away from the lecture today. Currently, I'm CEO of Adcorp Holdings Ltd, and we'll talk about that on the next slide. And my career has taken me from university all the way to business, and I've had the opportunity to run companies over a fair amount of time. As you can see from the gray hair, I'm not as young as I used to be. And over the last 30 years that I've been in business, I've had the opportunity to look after businesses in 23 countries across 3 continents. And that's been an interesting journey. But I've also had the opportunity to continue my academic career. So beside being CEO of Adcorp Holdings, I've also been what I would call a practitioner academic. I taught at the Gordon Institute of Business Sciences in Johannesburg for 7 years on their MBA program. I also sit on the advisory board at the University of Pretoria and the Indian Institute of Management in Bangalore. And I've also published a number of academic papers, presented at international conferences, and so forth. The important thing there is, when you leave this school, this university, it does not and should not signify the end of your career of growing in education. You can continue and should continue to further educate yourself, and there will always be an opportunity to give back to the institutions. That's a little bit about myself. Let's talk about Adcorp Holdings Ltd, the company. You may not know about Adcorp Holdings Ltd, but we are a workforce solutions company. We are part of the global staffing sector. And the company is 55 years old. It was founded as a staffing company 55 years ago. It was listed 35 years ago. And it remains at this point in time the largest listed staffing company in Africa and one of the 100 largest staffing companies globally. The company operates in South Africa and Australia. Half the business is in South Africa. Around about half the business is in Australia. And then we have operations in Mauritius, Mozambique, Angola, a whole bunch of other places. So about 50-50, 50% of our business in Australia, 50% of our business here. And if you look at some of the numbers, we published our results in May. The company has circa 12 billion ZAR turnover per annum. We have about 43,000 employees between South Africa and Australia. And we have circa 2,900 clients. And we have 17 brands that form the group. Some of those you may recognize, many of those you may not. Some of those brands are listed on the right-hand side. And if you have started looking, thinking about a career post your qualification, then you may know some brands, Kelly and Quest, which is in the recruitment space. DAV is a recruitment brand, but we have other brands that do different things. You'll see some of our Australian brands there. Labour Solutions Australia and Paxis are both in Australia, and then we have Paracon and Quest and a whole bunch of other brands. And being CEO of Adcorp and being part of Adcorp gives us specific insights into the world of work, both here and in Australia. And we're going to talk specifically about South Africa because the dynamics between Australia and South Africa are actually quite different. And they're surprisingly different. And when I tell people about what's happening in Australia, they can't really relate to the situation in South Africa versus Australia. So we'll talk exclusively about South Africa. And being part of Adcorp, being CEO of Adcorp, gives us an insight because companies come to us for some of those brands and they ask us to recruit employees for them. So they will come to us and say, and I was chatting to Dr. Falkman earlier, we've just completed a client request to appoint 40 riggers. These are oil riggers in the Gulf of New Mexico. So that's typically what Adcorp does. Companies will come to us and they'll say, we need 40 riggers in the Gulf of New Mexico. Can you find them for us? And then we will go out. We will find those people. We will place them. Alternatively, those 43,000 employees are employees. They work on client sites. So that's a little bit about myself, a little bit about Adcorp, the company. And what I want to do now is kind of talk a little bit about what's happening in the world of work and the changing nature of the world of work. There's been more change in the nature of work in the last 3 years than in the preceding 30 years. And you are entering, if you're going to enter the workforce next year, you are entering the workforce at a time of fundamental change. We've never seen the workforce this dynamic and this rapidly changing. In the world that you are going to enter, some of you may be familiar with the term VUCA, which is variable, uncertain, chaotic, ambiguous. And that was kind of the world as we saw it in the run-up to COVID. And COVID was quite a tipping point in terms of the world we all know. Some of you may remember, it's only 3 years ago that we were in lockdown as a country. You couldn't leave your house. You had to wear masks. You could only put 6 people in a taxi when the taxi actually ran. So, you know, the VUCA world was one we grew up in. What we now see post-COVID, and this particular term, Barney, is brittle, anxious, non-linear, incomprehensible. It's a phrase that was crafted by an academic, Casio, a United States academic, crafted that. And it signifies how we see the world right now. And you, as graduates or potential graduates to be, will probably be able to relate to that. I think all of us are able to relate to that in some or other way. That's the world of work that you are entering. It's brittle. It's anxious. It's non-linear. And in many respects, it's incomprehensible. So understanding this world of work that you enter in, it's critical that you are aware of that because it's a completely new dynamic for us in the formal world of work. And there are 2 big things that we see that has come out. One is that in the first instance, the concept of the work has changed. And it's changed in a fundamental way. And this will directly impact you. So if you look back 30 years ago, when I sat where you are sitting, not in this school, but in a different school. 30 years ago, there were 2 kinds of worker. There was the permanent worker, and there was the temp. And the temp generally came in for 2 or 3 reasons. One, if you had a female staff member who went off on maternity leave, generally you brought the temp in to cover for the period that the worker was not there, or if someone was sick or someone took leave, that's where the temp came in. Today, the nature of the work has fundamentally changed. So now workforces are made up of permanent workers, contingent workers, contract workers, gig workers, freelance workers, human cloud, artificial intelligence, and robotics. That's the shape of the workforce now from 30 years ago. And as a consequence of that, the percentage of permanent employment in the typical workforce for the last 3 decades has declined. And what we are seeing in the industry is something called quiet hiring, where companies are looking to complement the skills they need, but not through the appointment of permanent employees. And that is why you would have seen, if you followed this, you will see a significant explosion in the freelancer model, in the contractor model, in the contingent model. So the nature of the worker has changed. It's no longer about permanent worker and a non-permanent worker. You have all these different types of workers, and your career, it is likely that many of you will move between those various types of worker. That you may start as a permanent worker, and at some point you may go out and be a contractor. You may then be a contingent worker and come back into being a permanent worker. So we do expect that the Generation Z, most of you here would be Generation Z, that your careers into the future will be defined by this variability in the nature of work. That you won't always have a permanent job, but you may choose to go out and be a freelancer for a period of time. The second thing that's changed is the nature of the workplace has changed. And again, COVID has accelerated a trend that we were seeing prior to COVID. So prior to COVID, and this probably goes back 20 years, the workplace, there was two kinds of workplace. There was the office, there was the factory, and you went to work. Now what we see is that the workplace has changed. You still have the office, you still have the factory, but now you have co-working space. You have pop-up working space. You have your own home. So the nature of the workplace has changed from being a place that you go to a place where you are at. And many of us who've been in a shopping mall and gone past the Starbucks or the equivalent will see people working on their laptops, making use of free Wi-Fi. So for some jobs, the workplace is now where the Wi-Fi is. And that's not always good, because what we've also seen is you now have office-bound people, but you now have hybrid work, and you have remote work. And those three types of workplace is now integrated into one cohesive whole. And what it means, if you're working remotely, you never, ever leave the office, because you are constantly at work. So there's a downside to that. What remote working has also done is change the nature of how we recruit. So if you look at our company, the head of sales for our group is based in London. We have no office in London. We have no clients in London. But our group executive sales is based in London. As Dr. Volkman was saying, I spend most of my time outside of South Africa. Even though the group's head office is in Johannesburg, most of my time is spent in Mauritius. So this concept of remote working is now well embedded. Adcorp has a permanent hybrid policy. We don't ask our employees to come into the office every day. We ask them to come into the office every 2 or 3 days. Or 1 week on, 1 week off, 2 weeks on, 2 weeks off. The fourth thing on that slide, technology is fundamentally transforming the way people work. It's the biggest change that you will face as you enter the workforce. And you will have seen over the last 2 years the emergence of generative AI, artificial intelligence or pseudo-artificial intelligence. It will have as big an impact on your careers as you enter the world of work as the internet did 30 years ago when it emerged. And it's something that you should embrace. There's a fear, an unrealistic fear, not an unrealistic fear, but an unnecessary fear among people that artificial intelligence will replace jobs. And you may have heard that. Artificial intelligence will not replace jobs. The person who can use artificial intelligence will replace you if you can't. So one must look at the world of technology and embrace it, because it's the single biggest change that we are seeing. The final change that we've seen, and I've just listed this, there are probably many more, but these are the ones I think that are important. The final significant change is this concept of entrepreneurship, which is increasingly becoming a trait that employers are hiring for. And we were chatting earlier before we came here about the side gig. Some of you may have side gigs. The side gig is now legitimate. It used to be something that you never spoke about. You didn't tell your employer. But we are seeing companies starting to legitimize the side gig. So the side gig is an entrepreneurial gig. We are also seeing the rise of the solopreneur. What is a solopreneur? It's a person who has one or more companies and has exactly one employee, him or her. So the solopreneur is now starting to emerge. And the importance of understanding both entrepreneurship and intrapreneurship, in other words, being an entrepreneur inside a corporate, is pretty significant. Where did this go? And I'm just watching the time, otherwise I'll spend too much time on this. What does the South African job market look like right now? And you would have seen this. This is the world that you potentially are going to be entering into. And the more informed you are about the job market, the more likely you are to be successful. And sadly, a lot of this you are probably familiar with. South Africa battles with high unemployment. Right now, the unemployment rate in our country is 32.9%, which is among the highest unemployment rates in the world, in countries that report accurately unemployment rates and countries not at war. It's among the highest unemployment rates in the world. It was, in 2008, the unemployment rate was 19.5%. So over the last 2 decades, last 15 years, the unemployment rate has considerably worsened. And we're not going to get into that particular discussion, but if one looks at those who are unemployed, 48.3% of the unemployed do not have a matric. So half of the unemployed are people who do not have a matric. 40% have a matric but have no further education. And then if you look at the tertiary unemployment rate, it's 10.6%. A subset of that is graduates like yourselves, or soon-to-be graduates. And that unemployment rate, that's not mine, is it? No. That unemployment rate's about 2.7%. But we have seen over the last decade, graduate unemployment double. So it is, you enter in a space where it's particularly tough to get jobs right now. And that's the reality that, unfortunately, you face. In youth unemployment in South Africa is even worse. 61% of adults between the ages of 15 and 24 who are not in further education are unemployed in our country. And that is a catastrophe for a country with such a young population and the wasted potential that represents. So high unemployment sadly persists, and you are within that age group that sadly has a higher than average unemployment rate if one just looks at age, but you have got the benefit of a further education, and therefore among all of those categories, you are the most likely to get further or to get employment. An important thing is South Africa's economy is deindustrialized, and it's been happening over the last 16 years. So the industrial component of the economy was circa 23% 15 years ago. And these were companies like SAB Miller, like the coal mining and so forth. That's now 11%. So the industrial base of South Africa has shrunk, and the services component has expanded, which means your most likely job, your first job is likely to be, and we'll see a little bit later, most likely to be in the services sector. So South Africa's industrial base, sadly, has declined. The bad news is that the macroeconomic environment that we're all familiar with, high interest rates, not expected to come down until 2024, high inflation, likely to persist into early 2024, low growth. Last year, the country grew at circa 1.9%, 2%. This year, it's expected to grow at 0.3%. Next year, it's expected to grow at 1%. In 2024, 1.4%. So the economy this year will be in worse shape than last year. When you enter the job market next year, you will be in a situation where the economy is probably in more strain than what it's been in recent years, for all the reasons we're very familiar with. Load shedding, infrastructure failure, we don't necessarily need to go. So sadly, that is likely to persist. And it's something that we can't fix by ourselves. It requires government policy and government action. The important thing, sadly, I'm going to go to the next graph, the formal labor market in South Africa. Remember, South Africa's got about 58 million people, depending on how you count those who aren't actually citizens. That's what the job market looks like. And what you will see, and this is the size of the labor market, formal employment, excluding agriculture, because agriculture is quite seasonal. If you add agriculture to that, you get circa 14 to 16 million people. But this is the size of the formal labor market in South Africa. And what you will see immediately is Q1 2020 was when COVID hit. And what this shows is that the labor market has not recovered from COVID. The labor market is smaller than it was before COVID. In fact, I've got the Q1 2023 number. It's about 9.97 million. The formal labor market in South Africa is smaller than it was in Q2 2018. So South Africa's market has not recovered. And you can see there the sharp fall off and the slow recovery. So you are potentially entering quite a difficult labor market. And the macroeconomics aren't that great. There are high levels of unemployment. But it's not all doom and gloom. On the top right, you'll see two of our brands, Kelly and DAV, and they play in the space where they recruit on behalf of companies. Companies looking to recruit people will turn to Kelly and DAV. In our group, there are other companies out there. So this is actual data at this point in time. And that covers several hundred vacancies that those two companies are recruiting for. And you see 3 or 4 clear trends, which is useful to understand where the job demand is. And what you will see is that the single biggest demand right now is in finance and insurance. About 27.5% of the vacancies we are recruiting for are in finance and insurance. And that's a trend we've seen for an extended period of time. And sitting on the advisory board at the University of Pretoria in the engineering faculty, most of our engineering graduates from that school get absorbed by finance and insurance. You used to see consulting quite big before COVID. It hasn't quite come back. So finance and insurance is the biggest demand for jobs right now. Manufacturing 18%. You'll see other services 18%. And then the third biggest there is wholesale and retail. Why are we not taking specific job titles? That's because companies call the same things different names, and you can't normalize between the different names. So it's better to talk about sectors. And what you will see, if you add finance, if you add other services, if you add wholesale and retail, half the jobs are in the services sector. So that's sort of where we see demand for jobs, and that's based off Kelly and DAV data. And where are those jobs? Unsurprisingly, Gauteng is still the economic capital of the country, and more than half the job vacancies exist in Gauteng. So you're more likely to get a job in Gauteng than anywhere else. Based in the Western Cape, 32% of the vacancies are there, in KZN 7.5%. The small yellow triangle is about 7.7%. It's the other 8 provinces combined. So what we do see is the demand or the vacancies for permanent employment sit in Gauteng, the Western Cape, and to a lesser degree KZN. And it's really, really hard. Some of you may be from a more rural province coming to this university and wanting to go back. It's really, really hard if you look at places like Limpopo, Northwest, Northern Cape, and so forth. But there are jobs, and hopefully that gives you a sense. Let me get onto something that's important, spend a little bit of time here. What are employers looking for? And it's something which is crucial when you enter the world of work, when you start applying for jobs. What are employers looking for? And there are 3 things that they're looking for. 2 of those you will be able to deal with. The third one, you will have a challenge. Employers are looking for skills, they are looking for value, and they're looking for experience. Those are the 3 things that by and large employers are looking for. We'll deal with each one of those in turn. But employers are increasingly looking towards skills. It's important that as you enter your final year, you understand the fundamental difference between qualifications and skills. They are not the same thing. The fact that you've got a qualification doesn't necessarily mean that you've got the skills. So when you start talking to employers, it's vital that you talk about the skill set. Skill set is what your employer will hire you for. Value is what they expect you will bring. Experience is what they hope you will have, but we'll cover that in a second. So the hard skills, by and large, remain in demand. And these are the primary ones that we see from an Adcorp perspective. And here's the thing, your qualifications in the field of science give you those skills. So when you start preparing your CV, when you start talking to companies, talk about the skills that you've got, not the qualification that you have. We were chatting a little bit earlier in the reception, and I see so many graduates who enter an interview or apply for a job, and they spend a lot of time talking about themselves and their qualification. The brutal reality is companies hire you because they think you can add value. They want to know, what are you going to do for them? Not what they can do for you. That's South Africa. It's completely the opposite in Australia, unfortunately. Just as an aside, in Australia right now, we have structurally, there are 450,000 vacancies in Australia that we can't find people for. And it's so bad that we fly, Adcorp charters 737 aircraft and flies people in from Samoa, Papua New Guinea, Solomon Islands, Fiji, Tonga, because there's a shortage of workers. But sadly, you are not in Australia, you are in South Africa. So the key skills, the hard skills that employers are looking for, you actually have in your career, in your qualification. I'm just looking at the time. And there is a skills mismatch. What we are seeing in the world of staffing is that there is a significant skills mismatch between what business is looking for and what educational institutions and graduates are bringing to market. If you look at the ILO report, South Africa's got one of the worst skills mismatches between what employers are looking for and what graduates have. And therefore you get the frustration of graduates who are unemployed and vacancies that can't be filled. And it's a real dilemma for us. So the hard skills remain and remain important. Analytical skills. If you study in physics, if you study in engineering, if you study in maths, you've got that. After 3 years, you've got analytic skills. You should talk about that when you start applying for jobs. Problem-solving skills. We spoke about a Barney world, non-linear, incomprehensible. We spoke about a VUCA world, ambiguous, uncertain, chaotic. Those are the nature of the problems that businesses face. So you've got problem-solving skills. Logical thinking, becoming more and more important. And then that fourth point, digital skills, is something you must not underplay. Your generation is the most digital savvy of any of the generations that have preceded it. Generation Z is more digitally savvy than any other. And we know technology is changing the world into the future. That is the advantage that you must bring when you talk to potential employers. I'm not going to generalize. My daughter's 12. She spends more time on the phone than with me. And you will know that. But it's skills, it's digital savvy that you must bring to bear when you enter the world of work. The ability to deal with ambiguity. That was in the VUCA world, it's in the Barney world. The world is more ambiguous now than it's ever been. And that's always been there, but what we are seeing in your generation, and again, I'm not going to generalize, what we see with Generation Z is that because you are so digitally savvy, by and large, your social skills is not where it needs to be. Increasingly, businesses are saying, what's the social skills? Why are we battling to recruit? And those are some of the things. Communication skills. The downside of Generation Z is that they've not learned communication skills and the ability to communicate effectively interpersonally or inter-team. That's been a significant challenge. But companies are looking for communication skills. They're looking for teamwork and relationship management, the ability to work as part of a team. And in a very fractured world where we live for 2 years locked away in our own homes, this is a skill that we battle to see effectively in Generation Z, the ability to work as part of a team, because we've been so isolated. And what you find, it's quite ironic for your generation. Your generation is the most connected generation in human history. It's also the loneliest. And that's a strange dichotomy that we deal with. You can connect to everyone on the planet, but the degree of loneliness in Generation Z is higher than in any preceding generation. So the ability to manage relationships, personal responsibility, and self-drive and initiative. This goes to the way the world has changed. Many companies, I said our company has it as well, hybrid work. We don't expect people to come into the office every day, which means your ability to demonstrate self-reliance, self-starter, self-managed becomes key, because your boss isn't in your room. Your boss is potentially sitting at the end of a camera somewhere, and you're working alone. What companies are looking for are graduates who can demonstrate through their education they've taken personal responsibility and initiative. Resilience, I think that's sort of self-evident right now. You needed to be pretty resilient in Cape Town the last 4 days. It's not been that great. But those kinds of dynamic changes our companies are battling with on an ongoing basis. And then creativity. Your ability to demonstrate and talk about creativity when you enter the job market is key. Skills is what you have. Value is what you are bringing. And this is the single biggest thing that I see with graduates. They do not understand value is only perceived through the eyes of the company or your potential employer. It is not always the best candidate who gets the job. It is the best prepared candidate. So it's crucial that as you start entering the world of work, you understand what value represents to your potential employer. Because that's why they're going to hire you. Your ability to add value. And remember that phrase, it is not the best candidate that gets the job. It's the best prepared candidate that gets the job. So my recommendation to you as you start, and we'll talk about the final slide in a moment, as you enter this world of work, you must understand your potential employer, those you are approaching, what does value mean for them through their eyes? The one area where graduates battle, and there's a lament among many graduates who say, well, you know what, companies are hiring for experience, and we don't have experience. How are we supposed to get experience if they won't hire us? And that is a challenge. It's the biggest challenge that you will face, is that companies in South Africa tend to favor experience. Why is that? And that's because we have some pretty restrictive labor laws. So companies want to de-risk, because when you hire someone, it's actually quite difficult to fire them in South Africa. So as a consequence, companies hire permanent people quite late in the cycle. And they tend to move towards freelancers or contractors or gig workers first, and that's this business of quiet hiring, meeting the skills without hiring the permanent person. But what we are seeing is experience, old style experience, is now becoming less important because companies are looking for digital experience. They're looking for digital skills. And that is something that you have as a cohort entering the workforce. So you may not have the experience, but what you have is experience for the future. Because you, as a generation, by and large, are far more digitally savvy, far more technology enabled than your predecessors. It's something to remember. You may not have 10 years of experience, but you've got the skills for the next 10 years. And that is the kind of thing you've got to talk about as you start getting into the world of work. I'm going to spend, I know I've exceeded my time, and I do apologize for that. Let's just talk a little bit about me. So when I finished my master's in nuclear physics, I decided I wasn't going to be an academic, and I wanted to enter the world of business. It was pretty scary, okay? And I remember going for chats, and people saying, shouldn't you be working at Coburg? Yeah. You're a nuclear physicist. What are you going to do in a factory that makes margarine? That's the first job I had, by the way. Well, yeah, what are you going to do? Take the opportunity to sell your skills when people ask you that. And it actually became a standing joke. When I worked at Unilever, my first boss, wonderful chap by the name of Steve, he gave me the nickname, the failed nuclear physicist. He said, if you were that good, you wouldn't be in this margarine factory. So how do you deal with that? And for me, it was a case of saying, no, you don't want people like me in Coburg, because I'm creative, I'm curious, I like to try things out. And if you let me loose in Coburg, you get Chernobyl. So you don't want to have a creative person in Coburg. But maybe your company wants someone who's creative. Maybe your company wants someone who understands how to solve problems. So getting my first job was very much about planning. And that's what I would urge all of you. You must have a plan to attack entering the workforce. And how do you go about that plan? You have a network. You know many people. You can actually draw a network map, take a piece of paper and write all the people you know. Then draw a line to the people that they know. And then if you can, draw a line to the people that they know. You'll pretty much need an A0 page very quickly. Then ask those people who are in jobs if they will speak to you for a half an hour. Tell them you're not interested, you're not looking for a job. Do that now, before the end of the year. Go and speak to them. That's what I did. That was my plan. And why did I do that? I wanted to find out, what are the things you look for when you hire? What's important for you in this company? I'm not looking for a job here. I'm wanting to understand. When people feel free, they talk. So you go and say, listen, I'm not looking for a job, but you know what, I'd just like to get your insight, your advice. What are the kind of things you would look for? What are the things that irritate you in graduates when you speak to them? What are the kind of things that would impress you? Make those notes. Back in those days, and I know I'm hopelessly going over time, back in those days before the internet, the juicy jobs that I couldn't apply for used to appear in the Sunday Times. I don't know if that newspaper still exists, but it was the thick part of the Sunday Times. And I had this ambition, I wanted to be a CEO. So I used to cut out the advert for CEOs and COOs. And I would determine what were the skills that they were talking about. What skills did the advert say they were looking for? So I had this roadmap of skills. And then I worked out, okay, if I'm going to get there, best I work out a plan. You must have a plan. How to attack the job market. We've spoken about this, I'll go through quickly. Focus on adding value. Okay, it's about what you can do for the company. What problem can you solve for them? Know what you want. If you do not know what you want, as a physicist, your career will be a stochastic walk. Not always great. But if you have a rough idea as to where you want to go, you will focus on developing those skills and seeking out those jobs that will enable you to progress. Build a network. My first language isn't English, by the way, it's Afrikaans. There's a wonderful Afrikaans expression. Networking is not gatkruip. Okay? That's something completely different. You build networks by doing something for someone else without expecting something in return. Because you are never in the meetings where they are talking about you. So networks are not built going to someone saying, listen, can you organize something for me? That's not quite a network. A network is, what can I do for you? Because in 5 years' time, when someone says, we're looking for this kind of person, you know what, I met this guy. I'm going to give you his details. Give him a call. That's how the network works. And then finally, continuous education. Never stop learning. What we are seeing now is that companies are valuing short courses that teach specific skills and continue to build. I'm closer to 60 than I am to 50. Right now, I'm studying Python. Why? Because I think I need it. Never stop learning. We've gone way beyond the 20 minutes that I promised my guests, my hosts, that I would spend. So let me take the time again to thank you. And in the time that we've got left, very willing to answer any of your questions until you either need to go back to your lectures or we've concluded. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Wentzel. I think from a career services perspective, we certainly preach this day in, day out at Career Services. I think the challenge I'd like to put to you is that if in the near future, anytime you are going to be sending us your documents for review or coming to us for job search advice, you would have implemented Dr. Wentzel's advice that he gave here, and we'll see you with an action plan that we can maybe just add some tweaks to. But you would have thought about what you want to do with your career, and it's not going to be the insta fix to I'm done with my degree now, that dream job must instantly land in my job in my lap. So it's a process, as you can see, it's a process of contemplation, it's a process of deep investment in yourself and where you see yourself going. And most importantly, it is you that makes it happen and not somebody else. I think that's what I've taken from Dr. Wentzel's talk, and I think from a career service perspective, again, I just want to thank him so much for taking out of his time to be here today. Because like Dr. Volker said earlier in our many discussions, that there's so much that you need to learn about the realities of the environment that you're going into, and sometimes you get tired of hearing it from us on campus, that these type of engagements are, hopefully the tipping point and the turning point to how you perceive your future and how you put together this action plan. So we're going to open up the floor to questions. I've got one roaming mic. So Imran's going to help us. Please introduce yourself when you have a question so that we know who you are and you know what you're studying and what year you're in, and we can understand the context to your question. Any questions? Okay. So one over here, and the second over there, and the third over there. So are we first going to take one question at a time?
Let's take it one at a time because I'll forget. I'm getting old.
Okay, one at a time.
Hello everyone, this is Pigolom
Yeah,
Sanganyana.
it's fine.
I'm
Yeah,
a
it's fine,
student. The course I'm doing is it's a second year. It's a second year of first year of extended course, Physics 152.
Yeah.
Okay, I would like to, in terms of asking, cause I'm from the townships, I would like, how was the transition from the townships to here, or being able to adjust to the kind of pressure and the mentality from the townships to the big world?
Yeah, it's a good question, and the question was, what was the transition game from the townships? I grew up in the townships as well, so I can resonate with that. And you face structural difficulties in the townships that, to be fair, rich people don't face. it's quite what I experienced, and I can only tell you my experience. So I can't say I'm speaking on behalf of every township resident, because everyone's got their own personal experience. People look at you and go, ach no man, you're not going to make it, you grew up in this place. It's quite tough. The most important thing is your self-belief. Okay? You've got to block out those things that you look at and say, you know, they've had a better opportunity than me. They've got more than me. They've got access to stuff. You've got to block that out. And you've got to say, you know what, I can achieve this. So it's not an easy transition. And my transition was even more difficult, because you weren't born when I was making that transition. And I don't mean that derogatively. In 1985, I'm going back in history a little bit, 1985, so I'm giving my age away here. 1985 was the first year that the previous apartheid regime allowed black students to register at previous white universities without the expressed written approval of the Minister of Education. So when I went to university at UCT, there was whiteys everywhere. And I was looking, shit, where's the black people? So I had a very different experience. You're fortunate in that you've got a cohort who's lived your experience. What I would say is reach out. Turn to them as a support network. They will help carry you. It was very difficult for me because I had no one. You know, I'll never forget, and then I'll move on to the next question. Walking into Physics 104, Physics 102. And walking in like the early 80s, or the mid 80s, 1985, 1986, and sitting down in an auditorium like this and seeing white students go sit somewhere else, because they didn't want to have a black person so close to them. So sadly, my experience is not as lived. Thankfully, you haven't had to live through that experience. Turn to your colleagues, those who've experienced. Believe in yourself. Ignore the distractions. And never forget, there's 20 people out there looking at you. You're going to make a success. They're going to believe in themselves. All right, next question. I saw so many hands. I'm going to let someone. Yes, sir. Go ahead.
I know I'm in first year. No? I'm doing first year computer science extended degree program. But then my question is that how would you recommend / judge a person who, after hearing your speech and thinking of our current economic structure, how would you recommend or / judge someone who wants to take their skills or degree and move abroad?
It's an interesting question, because the one thing I can't do, which I won't give you advice, I'll give you perspective. There's a difference between the two. No one can give you advice because they're not walking in your shoes. So I don't think we should judge. That's the first thing. Yeah. At the end of the day, the economic realities of South Africa are what they are. That's the reality that we are dealing in. But if you understand where the opportunity arises and where you can make the differential contribution, then I think you've got a bright future. So I would never let anyone say, judge your choice or judge where you are. Again, similar answer to what I gave before. If you believe in yourself, if you're passionate about what you do, we didn't speak about that, we don't have time for that. If you're passionate about something, you'll pull through. Any of you doing a PhD, I know you're doing your PhD. Trust me, if you're not passionate about it, at 2 in the morning in your second year, you're going to go, why am I doing this? You know, it is so hard. Why am I doing this? I was like that. I sat at 2 in the morning going, why the heck am I doing a PhD? But I had a passion for it. So pursue your passion. Understand it and pursue it. Don't worry about the judgment. People will always judge. Other questions? Yes, sir.
Thank you, Doc, for the valuable insights that you've provided us with today. My question has 2 parts. Firstly, how does Adcorp continue to provide value to their customers in the ever-changing environment and the highly digitalized environment, number 1?
Yep.
Number 2, what are some of the common traits or threads between successful hires, particularly in the financial services and insurance spaces?
It's quite a complex question. Adcorp doesn't, how do we add value? Depends on the brands, and I showed the brands earlier, I'm not going to go there. So, for example, we have Charisma. Charisma is a nursing business. We provide nurses to hospitals. So there's a very specific niche. If you look at our Blue brand, we provide thousands of employees into manufacturing. There it's about how do we optimize the manufacturing process? How do we deliver efficiency? How do we reduce costs? How do we improve turnaround times? So each of the brands has got a very specific focus, you know, and a very specific niche. So that's sort of how Adcorp does it. Digital, what we are doing, and now we're talking a bit about the company, so I won't spend a huge amount of time. We have to react. So the brand you won't see on there is a brand we bought recently called Jobvine. That's a digital platform. And there, it's the kind of brand, and it's something for you, those of you in third year, looking to enter the job market. You must make use of the digital platforms to at least explore. So Jobvine is a pure play digital platform. It brings together job seekers and companies wanting to hire, and we've got thousands of jobs there. They tend to be mid-tier, they tend to be blue collar. So digital, the next big leap for us, which we will make over the next 6 to 12 months, is the introduction of AI into the hiring process. I will make a prediction that at some point in your career, you will be interviewed by a robot. It's just a fact, okay? And we are seeing that right now. If we had more time, I would have shown you a video. Volvo, a couple of years ago, recruited a bunch of mechanical technicians, and they used a car to recruit. They put the person in the car, and the car asked the person questions, and they used the AI to assess that. So digital, all companies have to go in that direction. We're going in that direction. It's crucial that you, as cohort of this university, embrace that, because that is the future. Hopefully it's given you a bit of an answer. All right? I'm just watching the time. Sorry.
What are some of the common traits between
successful and yeah, thank you, I missed that, so I apologize.
in the financial services?
Yeah. So what you see in financial services is high pressure, the need to quickly add value, and the need to be a self-starter. It's actually the soft skills. The graduates that are battling, those that generally don't make it, are not falling down on the hard skills. They're falling down on the soft skills, where they're not seen as a team player, where the communication skills are lacking, where they're not seen as being proactive. There we tend to find that companies go, but this person's not working out effectively. So it's the soft skills, and that's why I made that point. This Generation Z's single biggest battle is soft skills, not hard skills. Okay, has that given you a better answer?
Yes, sir.
Thank you.
Hello. So, good morning, Doc. Good afternoon, Doctor.
My colleague is looking up there. I want to see you.
My name is Randir Hiralal. I'm doing my third year of BCom Law. Okay. So my question is, you did your BSc, your honors, or you're a nuclear physicist, as you said. So why the jump into an MBA and not any other financial qualification like a CFA or FRM or even something in the MCOM? So why specifically an MBA, and how is your transition into doing it? Because I am interested in wanting to do one after I graduate. Did you progress into an MBA immediately from something to do with physics? So it's completely different fields.
Okay. So it wasn't an immediate progression. So I graduated in 1992. I finished my master's. Yes, I am old. I know some of you said. Hopefully I don't look as old. So I graduated in 1992 with an MSc in physics. I did my MBA in 1999. So there was a fair period between the two. It wasn't immediate. And and that's why I said earlier, know what you want to do. So I had this crazy idea that, irrespective of where I was born, I wanted to be a CEO. I wanted to be a COO. I wanted to be the top dog. But that was my passion. You may have different passions. And I looked at what are the skills, I spoke about it earlier, what are the skills that's going to enable me to get to that top? And my formative years was, I started as an engineer, started to add value, did the analytical stuff, and then I realized I wasn't being considered or taken seriously enough because I lacked a business qualification, a general business qualification, because I was always the nuclear physicist. As Steve used to say, a failed nuclear physicist. So in order to be taken seriously, I decided I would do an MBA because it was a generalist qualification. And that would deal with the gaps in my training. So I wasn't exposed to HR, I didn't know sales, all of those things. So it was a generalist qualification. It is no better or worse or the ones that you are talking about. But what I would say is give yourself the time, be it 5 years, 7 years, whatever. Get to understand, because it takes time to understand what you really want. Then potentially do your MBA. The students who immediately do their MBA after completing, generally kind of not quite sure what they want to do with it. So I did it sort of several years afterwards. And the transition was one of constantly looking, how do I add value? Where's the opportunity for me to show my employer And I've worked for Unilever, SAB Miller, Standard Bank, Woolworths, Sebo. I ran the South African Post Office. It made a lot of money back then. I ran the South African Post Office, and now I'm at Adcorp. So I've had quite a varied career over many, many countries. And for me, the key was always, how can I add value that enables me to take the next step so that I'm pursuing my passion? Not everybody wants to be CEO. You may have a different, but there's nothing wrong with that. But understanding what you want to do with your career, and that changes over time. So there may be an appropriate time, but I would just say, all of what you're saying, absolutely spot on. Give yourself the time, if you enter the corporate world, to work for a few years and then contemplate your MBA. You'll be more grounded in the person that you want to be. Is that?
Okay, so yeah, I'm going to come to you and you. Just one quick comment, John. So I'm going to embarrass him and myself now.
Uh-oh.
So the last point John made was really important. When I met John, I was a few years behind him at UST, but I got to know him as a tutor. And what was very obvious very early on was that my passion was in the teaching. His passion was seeing that teaching as a stepping stone to where he wanted to be.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Yeah.
That's a good point.
And I mean, I understand that now, but, you know, back then I was like, wow, what is John about? You know, you always had this big bunch of peas.
Everyone talks about that.
Like
I'm never going to live that down.
I got this from you, by the way, this idea. But I only have a few keys. He had this big bunch. And we always wanted to know what is he trying to, you know, unlock in life. But anyway, now we know.
There were some questions up there.
Well, hi everyone. My name is Temba, and I am a final year physics student, just like yourself. I was actually planning on continuing my studies in nuclear physics and all that. But so I just wanted to ask, like, shortly, how does Adcorp use AI? Since you said AI is a game changer, sort of in the same way as the internet was back then in the early 2000s. How does Adcorp use AI to like provide value and like maybe stand out? Because I'm sure there are other companies that you guys that do the same thing as you, but you are like different from them. So do you guys use AI? And if you do, how do you like integrate it into your workings? Yeah.
Thank you. So the question is, how do we use AI in Adcorp? So the field of AI is an emerging field, and it's emerging quite rapidly. So the use cases for AI in our sector is only starting to emerge. We use AI right now in a couple of ways, and we will expand that. One is to do data modeling, is to take data sets, large data sets of our clients, take those data sets and use the AI to draw out inferences, conclusions, patterns, trends that we would not have picked up ourselves. And to use the AI to get more predictive into the future. So I'd like to know, what is the probability of my client in this sector wanting to hire people in the next 6 months? If I know that, I can send my salespeople to them before they realize they need it. So using AI predictively is one area. The second area that we are using it is, and will increasingly start using it, is to do assessments and interpret assessments based on a large data set. So for example, we don't want to hire or put someone into an organization, and let's create this example. It's a fictitious example. If someone is an alcoholic, we're not going to give them a job in SAB Miller. It's going to end awkwardly for all of us. So we want to pick out specific skill sets, specific traits to optimally place the person. And then the final thing that we're starting to do with AI is very much in the area of supporting people doing some of the mundane work. So I'll give you an example. I have to write a board report every single month. The board wants to know how's the business doing. I use AI to help write that report. So all of the facts are there. I put that in, and I say to the AI, give me a draft report that I can then change. It saves me several hours. So we're using AI to automate some of the mundane tasks, and it also means there's certain skill sets that into the future are going to be in less demand than today. Now, it doesn't necessarily apply to this group, but if you had a passion to be an executive assistant, I would not recommend that as a career choice, because they are starting to disappear and they will be replaced by AI. If you have a passion for librarianship, and that's wonderful, but I would caution against it, because we increasingly use the internet to get information and less in the libraries. So if your career passion is helping someone find information in the library, yeah, I'd think carefully about that. And I hope no one's doing BSc librarianship here. Yeah?
I just wanted to ask if Adcorp, do you guys build your own AI tools where you like maybe give it your own inputs and stuff and then spit out something that you want? Or do you guys use like some other tools that are already out there on the internet?
Yeah, we would always, we're a staffing company. That's what we want to do. We want to put people into jobs. So we're not an IT company. We would always want to use off-the-shelf products and services and then merely use that. We've got an analytics capability where we build more complex models, but we never want to be a staffing company that builds AI models. Our passion is staffing. Okay. There's a question up there.
Good day, sir. My name is Madihwa Shikwani. I am doing my second year in chemical science. I have 3 questions, if you're fine with these 3 questions to be answered.
Can I just come up a little bit, because I can't quite hear what you're saying, so just bear with me as I traipse up the steps.
Okay, can you hear me clearly more now?
It's fine. The closer I get, the better I can hear. Yes, ma'am. What can I do for you?
Okay, so I have 3 questions. Are you fine if I can ask you all these 3 questions?
Sure.
All right. The first question is, okay, but first off, let me just say you did give out a lovely representation, so thank you for the lovely representation.
Sure.
The first question is, you did talk about artificial intelligence and how it has impacted the workplace, especially when you emphasize that it is not artificial intelligence that replaces workers, it's the person who uses AI and makes the effort, especially if the worker is incompetent or somehow then you get replaced.
Sure.
My question is, I would like you to interrogate how, especially that the power of creativity. I feel like artificial intelligence will have a challenge to like replace jobs that have such high intense creativity. Like it comes from within, so you cannot steal that someone's passion. So I would like you to interrogate how can AI replace jobs?
Okay.
As first question.
I'm going to ask you, because we've still got some other people. So let me answer that question, because I know there were some other people here, so I want to be fair and give everyone the opportunity. So let me just talk about creativity and this issue around AI. And it's an important question because it's this kind of nascent fear. When I sat where you, as students sit right now, we were taught that the machines will take our jobs. Okay, the robots are coming. And we were taught that the way to defend against that was to get degree or qualification that enabled you to be a knowledge worker. That was the defense, because the robots were coming. They were coming for the factory workers. When the machines came, they came for the knowledge worker, not the factory worker. So those of you who have used AI will know that you can pretty much ask AI to be creative. And if those of you who have play around with Mid-Journey, it's free. Put 4 or 5 words in, it will create a picture for you. So what happened was the fear that we had when I was sitting where you were sitting was STEM, science, technology, engineering. Those are the things you must study, because when the machines come, they're coming for the blue-collar worker. They came for the knowledge worker. So you can ask ChatGPT to write a story for you, but you can't ask it to cut up a meat carcass. It won't do that. So right now, AI has shown the ability to code. It's shown the ability to be creative. We've seen in our industry since October last year globally, there have been circa 800,000 redundancies globally in IT workers. We've seen IBM announce that they will not hire 7,000 coders because they are deploying AI to write code. So what you are seeing is the AI is actually entering the very space that we intuitively felt it would not do. And I don't turn this into an AI lecture, The large language models, LLM, like ChatGPT, what does it do? It does one thing. It predicts the next word in a sentence that you've written. Then it adds that to the previous words, and it predicts the next word. Like computers are very good at adding up noughts and ones, AI is very good at predicting the next word in a sentence. That's all it does. So how do you deal with that as a person? Learn the skill and how it can complement you to further your creativity, to further your productivity, to further your entrepreneurship, and not to be afraid of it. All right, I'm just watching the time. I don't want to keep you here beyond the time that you need to be here. Some of you may have other commitments. Yeah. Oh, there was one down here as well. So after that one, I'll make sure you get to ask your question. Oh, we'll have online questions, okay. Oh. Yes, ma'am.
Hello, everyone. My name is Zandile Mpumpa, and I'm doing Masters in Nanoscience. And my question is, when you were actually doing your undergrad and decided to continue to honors and doing Masters in nuclear physics, did you actually knew that you wanted to become a CEO? And why did you change your route? Because you went until Masters in nuclear physics and then you just changed your route in Masters. Why?
Yeah. So it wasn't a light switch, as you correctly pointed out. Who of you have seen the movie Oppenheimer? Maybe one or two of you had. Okay. So it's a wonderful movie. And all of you physicists should know J. Robert Oppenheimer. But I had a huge passion for wanting to be a physicist. People like J. Robert Oppenheimer, Enrico Fermi, Paul Dirac. That my ambition to be a CEO sort of emerged. And that's something that you must all understand. As you go through life, your ambitions will change, your dreams will change.
Testing.
This one, okay, my apologies. Okay, I've got two.
So, testing 1, 2.
My name is Wentzel. I'm a first year in the Physical Science Extended program. My question comes towards entrepreneurship. When people imagine or envisage a future where they're a CEO, they always imagine where they're at the very top, where they're millionaires, billionaire, but they never imagine doing the groundwork, the hard work. So what recommendations would you give to someone to like properly scale their company from like the ground up?
That's cool. Let me just put that on. Yeah, I'll stick it in here. That should work. Okay, hopefully you guys can hear us. I mean, this issue of entrepreneurship is one I think that's quite significantly misunderstood. And we tend to think about the entrepreneur as Elon Musk. You know, he came up with a great idea and he became super rich. And that's one form of entrepreneurship. But entrepreneurship in an organization is quite closely linked to creativity. So my advice would be always be curious. Always ask, you study in science, you will know, you always want to find out what's the root cause of this. So never lose your curiosity, because it's curiosity that enables you to spot opportunity. And that opportunity may be one day in a space where you go, actually, I found a passion that I want to be my own boss, start my own company. Nothing wrong with that. So the advice I would give is never stop being curious, never stop learning, never stop questioning, because you will find things suddenly appear that you hadn't thought of. So that would be my advice, wherever you are. Okay.
John, I think there's one anxious question.
There's one up there, and then I know there was 2 online questions. So I'll take that one, and then we'll take the online question. Okay. All right. So we'll take that final in-class question or in-auditorium question. Yes, sir.
Good afternoon. Okay. So my name is Kudwana, and I do first year / second year CP BSc in physical science. So my question is for the 152 physics students. It's for us. I'm asking in a way, it's a collective question. So we are currently doing Python now.
Yep.
So I heard that you only just started now to learn Python. So I'm curious to know what changed. Like, why did you want to learn Python now? And what changed from your area of work that led you to start learning Python? And please be specific in what area do you need it for? And how can you advise us as the 152 students who are now only doing Python to actually take it serious, and how can we add it to our CV?
Okay. Quite a complex question. So I'll talk about it from my perspective. Let's just talk about Python. Python's one of the easiest languages to learn from a computing perspective. So when I was studying, when I was sitting where you were sitting, that language hadn't been invented. So my coding back then was in Fortran. I think that's gone extinct. Pascal, that's gone extinct. C, not C++, C, they're still around. So that was my initial programming languages. And Python's a lot easier to learn. For me, why am I learning it now? Well, I'm curious. And I'm curious because the combination of AI plus Python, you put that 2 together, you start getting into something called machine learning. Huge data sets that you can use to draw inferences. This comes back to your question around entrepreneurship. You put that 2 together and you get a data set. You may draw inferences from it that no one else has drawn. And that, for me, is why I'm quite keen to learn, because I think it's a fundamental part of taking AI plus Python, putting them together and extracting value for the organization. And it's very hard to tell your employees, to tell your senior team that AI is important and Python's important, and you make no effort to get involved in that at all. You don't have a lot of credibility. So those are sort of the reasons. To put those 2 together, I think it's an easy segue into machine learning. Okay. Let's get to online questions. Oh, there was one here as well.
Ian Schroeder just wants to add something to that because he's our V Python expert.
I should come to your class.
So, yeah. Just to add to that, it's still the human creativity, the complex problems, the wicked problems, and our creativity to still unpack that and then use the AI and the Python. That is the key.
Yeah, it's a very good point as well. Yeah. It's an excellently made point. Thanks.
Okay, so our first question is from Kamohela, who's a student studying applied geology. And Kamohela was asking, is it a wise option for studying BSc applied geology under the threat of AI in these days?
I don't, I would, it's not my domain expertise, but what I would say is I don't think it's a threat. But the threat is if you don't understand how to use the AI relative to that, then it becomes a threat. So my view would be it's not an existential threat for the field, but it's an opportunity for the field to be able to add more value quicker through combining the knowledge and the AI to get better outputs. I wouldn't sustain a view that it poses a threat as such.
Thank you. The next question is from Noto. Did Dr. Wentzel get an opportunity to use his skills at the margarine company? If yes, what were those skills? I'm asking as a person who's considering that specific industry. She just says work industry.
So the short answer is yes. Now, of course, Dr. Volkwein will know. In my honours here, we covered quantum chromodynamics, study of the strong force. You don't apply that in a margarine factory. I mean, that's a given. However, understanding the basics that you would cover in first year, which would be statistics, which would be logical thinking, which would be breaking down a problem into bite-sized chunks that you can solve it, which would be applying the kind of testing the solutions, the kind of things that you've learned in your degree. That basic thinking, basic thought pattern is fundamental in any situation where you're trying to solve a problem. So when I started as an engineer, we had, and then I'll close on this question, we had a problem with margarine wrapping on the margarine blocks. And because I was ostensibly the clever one, they said, well, you tell us what's wrong with that. And it was a statistical approach. How many blocks? What's the frequency? What percentage? Which line? What time of day? And applying that, you suddenly wind up saying, hang on, the problem occurs on night shift. Let me come in on the night shift. Let me stand on the production head of this particular line. Let me observe. And what it turned out is there was a flap. You know, when they make the margarine, there's these little things that fold the flap. There was one that was not properly mounted to the head. So every now and then it would vibrate and it would fold poorly. And once you understood using statistics and basic decomposition of problems, you could identify that. That was the value that I added. Just through an analytical approach, saying, you know what, I think one of these heads, one of the flaps is loose. Let's stop the line, let's disassemble the head, let's check the mounting of the flaps. It turned out I was right. I was a hero because no one else had applied that thinking. So the answer is yes, absolutely. One more question, and then we must let you go to have a good weekend.
No, some of them must go group class tutorial.
Okay. Is that why you're staying this this long with me? All right. Can I take your question, sir?
Is the green light on? Like you've got to press it for like 2 or 3 seconds, and there's a small little.
You got it? Okay.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Debo Hoponya, and I'm studying, I'm doing my second year. I'm studying a BSc in Maths and Stats. So what I would like to ask, my question is very simple and straight to the point. What is the best way to prepare for the future from where we are right now?
My God, you do pick a difficult question, don't you? It is such a, it's not going to be sufficient time to answer that. So the future is not something to be feared. We sometimes think the future is something that happens. You are shaping the future as a collective. It is your future that you are shaping. So that's the first thing. The best way to prepare for the future is to create that future. Then you're shaping it. So that's the first thing to keep in mind. The second thing is you have to know about what the future looks like. It goes back to the point I made earlier, continuous education. The half-life of skills right now at a university level is 4 years. What does that mean? 50% of the information that you've learned, depending on the field, that you've learned in your first year, especially if it's information that changes over time, it's likely to be obsolete by the time you get to year 4. So you must never see the end of your career as the end of your education. That would be a terrible mistake. So what I would urge you all to do is to read about those developments, those trends that are shaping the future. The more aware you are of what's happening, the more likely it is that you will be able to influence it to your desired outcome. So never fear the future, shape the future. All right, I think I've exhausted my stay. And before we you want to take one more? No.
She's never going to forgive me if I don't give it.
Okay, so that will be the last question.
I know that individual.
Okay, so that is the last question, and then we will wrap because I think some of you've got other obligations. I see.
Hello, everyone. I would like to take this chance to thank Dr. John for the wonderful presentation. My name is GIBS MBA. I'm doing my second year in ECP, Chemical Sciences, but I'm interested in physics also and maths. Okay. I'm going to combine my questions to make it one because of time. 2 days ago, I was on the internet and then I saw one of the highlights saying about 4.05 billion bridges coming to South Africa. So I want to know, does that contribute to South African economy, and if so, how? And then I have heard while you were presenting that about 48%, what can I say, people do not have matric. So how do we help such people? Because everyone has their own different stories. So how do we help them so that we can uplift our South African economy and decrease high unemployment rate? Thank you.
All right, so that will be the last question, and thank you for that. There are two parts to that. That's sort of any investment, does that contribute to the economy? It depends on the nature of the investment. And what we have seen in our country over the last couple of years, we've seen capital flight. And there's circa between 110 and 140 billion in investment that's left South Africa. And that's as a consequence of the macroeconomics in South Africa. Whenever you invest in a country, you always have choices. You can go to other countries, and sadly, investors are going to other countries. So any investment contributes, any investment helps, but it must go to job creation. If it doesn't, then it becomes a financial investment, and it goes into stocks and bonds, and when the market turns, that goes out. The second question is, what do we do with the nearly half of the unemployed who have not finished matric? It is a significant problem that requires government to take the kind of bold steps to bring them in. Right now, unfortunately, there is no demand for unskilled labor. There's very, very little demand for unskilled labor. And if you look at countries that have had a similar problem and addressed it, they've by and large addressed it through public works programs. So large-scale public work programs that allow unemployed people, A, to earn an income and to earn a skill at the same time. But we've not seen the political dynamic to do that. The resolution of that problem, sadly, is a governmental problem that they need to solve, and government needs to put the policies in place to enable the absorption of that. But unfortunately, our economy right now with high unemployment means that the ability to absorb those people, sadly, simply not there. I do know that we are completely out of time. So let me just from my side thank you all for staying this long on a Friday. I've really enjoyed chatting to you. Thank you for those questions. Hopefully you've learned something and got a bit of insights. But let me close up by handing to Dr.
Dr. Wenztel, thank you very much from the Physics Department and UWC's Career Services. Thank you very much. Could we all give Dr. Wenztel a hand, please? All right, and the final word will go to Nazrana Parker from UWC's Career Services, which is a unit within the student development services, right? Yeah.
Thank you. So I think I want to point out something very important to you. This event today was born out of a tutor and tutee relationship at university 30 years ago? Almost. Okay. So my challenge to you is that one day you are going to make this possible at UWC again. Okay, we might not be around, but I leave the challenge to you that you're going to make similar experiences available for students that come after you to UWC and create opportunities through your networks for learning and engagement. Okay. So that's my challenge to you. Secondly, I want to thank AVS and the rest of the Career Services team for making Career Services' first live stream event possible. I didn't tell you that. Okay. So we obviously arrange lots of events on campus, but this was our first live stream guest talk, and it's the first of many.
So the taxi thing was a good thing. It forced us.
Yes, it did. So there's benefits. There's always benefits to the good and the and the bad that sometimes happens in our lives. It's just for us to see it. I've passed around Career Explorer notices. You'll find a recording of Dr. Wentzel's talk on Career Explorer in the resource tab of the system and on the UWC Career Services channel. So I encourage you to share it with your colleagues and your classmates and get them to watch it instead of watching Kim Kardashian and everything else. So it's a very meaningful 1 hour, good 1.5 hours, I think, of insightful information that you can share with your peers. And I just want to thank you all for taking your time out on a Friday afternoon to be here. And kudos to you for investing in your own career planning and attending this event today. So thank you to everyone for being here today. Thank you.
Yes.